Welcome to Minds Worth Meeting. I'm Whitney Jennings.
And I'm Justin Lewis.
On this episode, we sit down with Ruchika T. Malhotra to talk about her new book, Uncompete, Rejecting Competition to Unlock Success.
Ruchika is an award-winning inclusion strategist and best-selling author who brings a fresh, empathetic approach to belonging and inclusion.
If you're looking for ways to align inclusivity initiatives with hard metrics, this episode is for you. What sets Ruchika apart is how she weaves rigorous research with real-world applicability, all narrated through engaging, highly relatable stories. It's all substance, no fluff.
Ruchika, thank you so much for joining us on Minds Worth Meeting. Congratulations on the book.
Thank you so much, Justin and Whitney. So glad to be here.
So, such an interesting concept with Uncompete. Can you talk about that a little bit? And I want to give you a little bit of my background. So I'm coming from the broadcasting industry where you compete or you're done. So I think it's such an interesting concept, and I'd love you to tell us about it a little bit.
Yeah. And Justin, actually, we have a little bit of that commonality. I started my career in business journalism. I was actually a reporter for quite a few of the wires. So there was a lot of like, either you break the story or you're done, and if your competitor gets it, you're out. So I really understand that sort of mindset and mentality and those challenges. But really the concept of uncompete turns a little bit of that on its head. And it says, do we really need to compete? Is that the only way to succeed? And actually, so much of research and data shows that, whether it's innovation in the workplace, whether it's living happier, healthier lives, whether it's creating a society that isn't ravaged by various challenges, whether it's creating a system where more people feel heard and seen, all of that actually comes when we reject a zero-sum way of thinking where there's only one winner, where only one person can win at the cost of everyone else losing. And so I think there's a real opportunity here to disrupt business as usual. It's not easy. It's not the norm. It definitely will require quite a lot of rewiring of the norms that we hold dear. But if we do it well, the possibilities are endless.
That's one of the things I wanted to drill down on a little bit. So in addition to my background, my father comes from a background of car sales. And again, it was your survival is month to month. If you don't have the most sales, you don't. So how do we break people of that mindset?
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is that this is a systemic issue, right? It is a systemic issue if we live in a system and we live in a society where there are a lot of people who have a lot of abundance. And the belief is that that abundance has to come at the cost of other people's survival and security and success. So there is a lot of like rewiring of the way things are done. For example, just looking at sales, rather than creating a system where people are pitted against each other, there's a lot of research to actually show that when you work in collaboration with each other, when you share different opportunities as they come in, right? And especially create a system where a person who, at that moment might not be the right salesperson for that, opportunity, they might not be at a place where they can make another sale. They don't have to feel like they have to give everything up to be able to make that happen. And what we realize is that in a lot of current corporate culture, that's the way things are. Rather than give up an opportunity that people are like, this isn't the right one for me right now. The next one that comes along, I'll be more ready. Rather than that, what we have is people really going out of their way, feeling extremely burnt out, extremely isolated, extremely stressed, burnt out to really a chronic illness sort of situation. And I think that's what I really want to push back against.
Yeah. And I'm thinking about the benefits of uncompeting. And I imagine that there's benefits to the individual, but are there also benefits to the organization? Like big picture as a leader, what would get them to say, yes, this is a mindset that I need to adopt because I can see the benefits down the road?
Yeah, and actually looking at this, I'd love to pay homage to one of, both a Stern strategy client and someone whose work that I deeply admire, which is Dr. Amy Edmondson. And if you look at her work around psychological safety, it makes so much sense to think about how do you create an environment, whether it's in very high stakes, situations like the neonatal ICU, hospitals, how do you create a situation where or an environment where people feel safe to speak up in, again, in life and death situations, right? And that is a very clear marker of creating change and innovation. Now, looking at, psychological safety in Dr. Edmondson's work, one of my favorite studies was actually Project Aristotle done out of Google, where looking at, the most high performing innovative teams at Google, there was only one thing that they all had in common. And essentially, it was this idea that, like, my team has my back. I feel like I can take risks, I can fail, and I still know my team has my back. So you can imagine that a competitive environment actually creates the opposite of that, right? An environment where you feel like, actually, if I fail, or if I let my guard down, or actually I'm not the right person for this opportunity, but if I let the person next to me who I see as my rival get it, then I'm not, I'm going to fail. I'm going to lose out. I'm going to lose my job. So what I'm saying is, actually, a lot of the way that our current workplace norms operate are actually antithetical to creating an innovative environment, even if we don't have the moment to stop and think of it. Now, I think this is where Uncompete does require a mindset shift, right? The book, when I wrote it, required me to take on 5 very normalized myths in our society, right? Myths like, if I don't compete, I'll lose out, right? If we don't compete, we can't innovate, right? It's totally fair for me to compete because that's just the way that it is, right? Even if I don't agree with it, that's just the only way to succeed. So I really try and dismantle these ideas, because what you realize is actually what has allowed us as human beings to be so successful throughout history, to be the most successful species on Earth, and really to outlive, has been our radical collaboration. It is not to do with the fact that we have competed with each other.
That makes me think of that parable that says something to the effect of, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. Or, go with someone, take people with you, do it together. So, I mean, it seems like a no-brainer, honestly, because that is the point of business, is to go far. So it's very interesting to see how the mindset shift will take form.
I wanted to go back to a similar concept, talking about the team, when you were talking about supporting your team members, and that can be a very mutual thing. If you're the one not able to get there this time and you help someone else, they're going to be more likely to help you next time.
You're so right, Justin. And I actually want to, Whitney, before we move on, I want to talk about that really beautiful proverb. It is an African proverb. I've been trying to find exactly which country. Apparently, it's sort of in various different African countries, so it's now kind of known as an African proverb. I really do love it. It's actually etched on the walls of one of the clients I've had. I've had the good fortune of working with for a long time. If you walk into their headquarters here in Seattle, where I'm based. And it always reminds me of this idea that if you want to make big change, right? And if you think of some of the work that philanthropic organizations are doing, if you want to make big change, it does require you to bring people along with you. And often people who don't look like you, who don't have the same backgrounds as you, often don't have the same resources as you. So this idea that you have to go fast alone is something that is, again, very different from what history has shown us actually works for us to go far as a society. And so, Justin, I did lose track of your question. If you could ask it again, please.
Yeah, from the teamwork standpoint and lifting each other up, that it can be a trade-off, it can be a mutual thing. You do something to help somebody this time, in the future, they're going to be more likely to help you.
You're so right. And Justin, I think one of the difficulties sometimes with Uncompete, like even when I was putting this together, is I do talk and I do write very frankly about situations and circumstances I've had where people didn't help me, where I felt like I helped them and I didn't get it completely reciprocated in the way that I thought that I would. Now, this is where really that mindset shift needs to happen, where you kind of think of generosity, especially what I call one of my concepts of Uncompete, is one of the principles really is radical generosity, is you kind of pay it forward into the universe. And I don't mean this in sort of like a, in an anti-science sort of like woo-woo la-la way, but really one which has shown time and time again that when you do something positive for one person, hopefully, I mean, maybe it's reciprocated, maybe it's a fantastic relationship. I've had some amazing relationships in my career that has really come from having a wonderful relationship, or really having a situation of mutuality with people. But I also have seen it paid forward in ways. So it may not come back to you in exactly the same way. But the reality is, like, we have to design for the workplace and the society and the team that we want to see, right? So sometimes that does mean going out on a limb a little bit. It might mean going and, you know, uh, demonstrating and modeling radical generosity, even if it hasn't been modeled to you.
That is why I always let people into traffic. It did not come back to me in the form of that $2 billion lotto, but I figure every little bit I can use it down the road at some point.
Justin, actually, traffic is a really good example. I didn't use it in the book, but I think about this all the time. And I think of like what's at stake when
Sure.
when we, I'm actually forming this thought as I go along. I think about this all the time because I'm always driving in traffic somehow. Every Seattleite will know what I'm talking about here. And I think what's interesting is that there's actually this concept of like, there's this idea of like, if I like elbow my way out, I'll get to my destination faster. And actually, this is my own experience. I'd be curious. I actually now want to, at the end of this podcast, go back and look if there's any actual validated research. In almost no situation has the difference been that noticeable where I have sort of never let other people through, like pushed my way, in through traffic. I think the difference might be like 2 or 3 minutes. And when you think about what's at risk, when you think about like the risk of like what could go wrong, what could go pear-shaped because I was like, no, 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 you're not coming through. How much more my time would have been delayed if someone else didn't get that message and there's a collision. I've thought a lot about that as well. Again, no research on that to back that up, but I have a feeling that it holds true.
Yeah, and we're here in New Jersey, so we get plenty of that. And I don't want it to sound like I get pleasure out of the misfortune of others, but when they are sitting at that next red light, there's that little bit of satisfaction.
There is. I understand that. Schadenfreude, as they say.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
I love how you extend the uncompete concept beyond the office into young people in school and social media. Can you talk a bit about that and what that looks like?
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to talk a little bit about how much I know, I've spent my career observing workplaces. As I said, I started as a business journalist. I now advise organizations on cultures and inclusion strategy. But what I find time and time again, and again, no surprise to any of us, we are so much more than who we are at work. And often what happens to us in our homes, right? The sort of interactions we're having with our spouse, with our friends, with our children, maybe our nieces and nephews, like whoever is in our lives, those touch points really make a big difference into who we are when we get into the workplace and vice versa, which is why creating inclusive workplaces, cultures where people feel valued and like they belong and like they're doing meaningful work also has a big bearing on who you become when you come back into, or who you are when you come back into the work, into your homes, and you're connected again with your family, your friends, your social circle. So I absolutely am very much of the mindset that we have to talk about work not as a separated thing. And again, this is where having an individualistic versus collectivistic sort of mindset. And I definitely I come from a collectivistic culture. I was born and brought up in Asia, in Singapore. I do think that we have to understand how much of who we are at home do we bring to the workplace, and therefore create a workplace that is really inclusive to who we are, authentically as our true selves. So that was a very roundabout way of answering your question, Whitney. But I thought it was very important to look at how social media use and especially envy, especially competition and comparison was impacting young people in the workplace. And young people who are going to be our future leaders and our future employees employees in the workplace, because I think that absolutely, I think that employers need to know what we're up against, right? We have skyrocketing depression rates, especially among young men and women, actually. And so being inclusive of mental health, being inclusive and understanding of where some of these challenges are coming from and solving for them is going to be really important for employers.
Competing with, I'm thinking particularly about social media. It seems like people are just putting out anything for likes and for that engagement, and things that they might look back on a few years from now and say, that was probably not something I should have put out on the internet. And so I don't know the exact research, but I hope somebody is looking at these social platforms and advising them to, change how they structure the like engagement process. And I think Instagram has started to allow you to turn off the likes from being visible to the outside world. I'm not sure how effective that has been for, talking about mental health on people, but I just find that so interesting and a little scary as we move forward.
You're so right.
And as a former middle school teacher, validation is everything at that age. And I want future kids to be able to know that that's not the place that they necessarily should be looking for that validation.
You're so right, Whitney.
That's exactly where I was going to go with that there's that dopamine hit from getting the likes, but when you don't, it's going the other way.
No, you're so right, both of you, because I think I've been thinking a lot about this. I do have a 9-year-old child, but I also think what's extremely necessary is for employers and teams to understand what's at stake, right? Especially as we're coming up against this, obviously the very, very, the prevalence and the proliferation of AI, that I think that we really have to have a system in place where we're able to connect with people and we're able to really, in many ways, show up as a support for people, especially as they're struggling with using a lot of these tools. Now, I think even on the social media front, there's been very much a lot of activism. I have done advisory work with some of these social media companies as well myself. While there is important sort of understanding, again, when we think about competition at all costs and why, even with research, even with very, very good, strong, almost unarguable research to show that yes, this is a problem, that creating platforms where people are competing for likes, the comparison, the envy, the depression, there's this vicious cycle. There's a reason why they aren't addressing that head on or nearly as quickly as they should be, right? So there's that side of it. The other side of it, as I write in Uncompete, is that there are practices that we need to engage in around our own social media use, because I don't feel like the platforms are catching up to this nearly as quickly as the problem is, right? And that could be things like not only limiting social media use, which is, one of the sort of big things that experts talk about, but I think it's also ensuring that when you engage in social media mindfully, you also do it with people who are talking about positive things, about things that actually enrich your lives, that is based on collaboration and abundance and creating a joyful world, as opposed to one which is all about like who's winning over whom, who's elbowing whom out of the way. Different topic, but I do also talk about reality TV and how growing up in sort of the time of reality TV, I write this early in the book in Uncompete, was something that really affected me, right? It really affected me because I kind of came of age around the time Survivor came on TV, and then there's this, that after that it was like there was just no stopping of these sorts of programs. And I look back at the type of television that existed before, right? You would watch, say, for example, Wheel of Fortune. You'd watch a game show. Let's call that a reality TV, sort of competitor, but or the start of a reality TV. But you'd watch a game show. It was a very finite amount of time. The rules were very clear to everyone who got on it. it. And, when I talk about Uncompete, I don't talk about like, oh, we should never have sports again. There should be no game shows. There should be no, let's not play games with our families. No, no, none of that. What I'm talking about is what that very wholesome, let's watch Wheel of Fortune or Jeopardy or whatever it is, how that in many ways evolved to this idea that you had to be really vicious, you had to take others down. We all vote for our favorite Kardashian. In the UK general elections, I did my undergrad there. I remember there were fewer people who voted or there's some controversy around this, but apparently there were fewer people who voted in the UK general elections than like Big Brother, where you vote someone kind of off the island in some ways. So I think that there is more conversation that we need to have about this, and we do need limits on it too.
It's such a great example. And me as well. I was at the beginning of Survivors when I started getting into my media career. So, there's always that pop culture awareness, American Idol. Just earlier this week, I think it was 24 years ago, that Kelly Clarkson won the first season.
Wow.
And it's evolved
I feel
so
old,
much
Justin.
Right.
No, so do I. Yeah.
I remember that so well.
One of the first radio stations I worked at, we played Kelly Clarkson's song when it was new. And those are the moments where I'm like, wow. But it's so interesting how at first reality shows like that seemed a little more genuine because nobody knew what to expect. But now you watch shows, I'll use Big Brother as an example just because it's on now, and people come in with that strategy. They're playing a character and they know it. And it's so interesting how that's evolved over the last 20 some years.
They're rewarded for it. It's
Yes,
not
yep.
even, I mean, that like the rules of engagement are the more controversy you can create, the more you can show that you treat others as rivals. That's actually in many ways the winning strategy. And that worries me greatly.
Yeah, it's such a great example.
I want to take us back a little bit to come back to compete, but your previous book, Inclusion on Purpose, discussed creating a culture of belonging at work. And I feel like a lot of times people don't really understand the term diversity, and it's misused. As I've come to understand it from your work and from from the work of the other experts that we have the pleasure of learning from, is that diversity is not just about ethnicity and skin color, and it's about the lived experiences of the people and being able to pull in those different lived experiences into your business so that you have more perspectives and can make decisions from a wider lens, so to speak. How am I doing as far as that goes?
You're spot on. And I love the work of Catherine Phillips, who was the late great Catherine Phillips, Dr. Catherine Phillips, who was a professor at Columbia. And essentially her research very clearly demonstrated what happens when you put together teams. In fact, speaking of competition, we put together teams of people who need to solve a problem. One team is made up of people who are racially homogenous, and the other team is made up of racially mixed people. And how you actually solve problems better. And the reason for that is because you expect that the person who's different from you isn't going to have the same information as you, whereas you expect there to be groupthink with the person who looks like you and has sort of other shared identities. And I think in so many different, juries make better decisions when they're racially mixed. We solve problems and puzzles better when we're racially mixed. We come to those solutions again in a more competitive sort of situation. You come to those correct solutions faster when you are in mixed teams. So I think that there's a lot of great research to show why diversity makes a big difference. Now, there are experts who are actually in this field who always remind us that causation and correlation are two different things. Mm-hmm. And so for me, often when I think of examples that might even not be research backed, there are many research backed ones as well. Again, there's that question of, does causation and correlation, can it be the same thing? I think the other thing we have to recognize is, as humans, we are very multifaceted and complex people. It is possible that when we come into the workplace, a lot of our other experiences, even if we have certain identities that are similar, they are going to be different, right? For example, I present as Indian, but I really am much more shaped by being a Singaporean than I am being sort of visibly presenting as an Indian person. So I think there is some level of like, how much does diversity actually make a difference? I would still say it makes a very big difference. And even when I look at some of the clients I've been really lucky to serve, clients I've really learned from, you see what happens when people from different backgrounds have a shared understanding and a shared purpose to make change in the world. Again, I'm thinking of especially some of my nonprofit philanthropic clients that I've been lucky to work with over the years. You see a big difference when people, again, who you could be in a room trying to solve a really difficult, challenging problem, and then someone says, hey, this is my perspective on it. And another person says, I didn't think of it that way, but hey, let's continue to go down that path and let's see what our different experiences put together, what outcome we can come up with.
And I'd love to, you made an excellent LinkedIn post not long ago where you had said that Uncompete is kind of an extension of inclusion on purpose. Can you talk about that connecting thread?
Yeah, thank you. My face went a bit like, oh no, what are we going to talk? Sometimes on my LinkedIn, I can get a little bit spicy. It's just very much my personality. But indeed, and I think this is a very critical time in our history, right? We are talking about what it means to advocate for diversity, equity, and inclusion at a time where there is we're facing, the biggest headwinds I've seen in my career. I'll be honest there. And so I have had people ask me, oh, so, did you have a crystal ball that you kind of had uncompete, at a time where there was such headwinds again, that did you expect and anticipate that there would be headwinds against DEI? And so you were able to pivot. If I had a crystal ball, I would be much richer and I would be living on my private island. So no, I did not have a crystal ball. I will say what was clear to me, and how Uncompete, the genesis of Uncompete, really came at a time where it was the heyday of DEI, right? I was flown all over the country, all over the world, to speak about the research I had done and case studies I'd done around equity and inclusion. I was asked to speak about my last book, Inclusion on Purpose. And the number one sort of pushback I would face, which was really unexpected, I would say at that time, the sort of pushback that seemed very clear to me wherever I was, wherever in the country, wherever in the world, whatever type of industry that the organization was sort of in, I would notice that there was this feeling of like, I get the reason DEI needs to exist in theory, but in practice, does that mean that, hey, if I have a women's leadership organization or a women's leadership initiative, are the men going to lose out, right? Or if we look at neurodiversity in the workplace, does that mean that for me, who doesn't identify as neurodiverse, there's not going to be opportunity for me? So that sort of zero-sum competition, that there's like a ranking, right? That, like, yes, I want people who have been historically underrepresented, historically underestimated. I want them to succeed. I want there to be progress. But does that have to, that's definitely going to come at the cost of my success, right? And so I found that a lot of the conversations I was having around creating a more equitable culture of belonging actually was around this idea that, hey, I'm going to lose out if we go ahead with this work. And so Uncompete really came from that. It was an evolution of that, where Inclusion on Purpose tells you how to create, more inclusive cultures of belonging. There's good research and data to back that up, stories. Uncompete is, here's how you do it, but you also have to really have a gigantic mindset shift for us to make the type of change that we believe in.
And I imagine it's not a blanket situation as far as helping people change their mindsets. The reality is there will always be some people who don't want diversity, who don't want that, broader idea exchange. They like what they want what they like, and they want to keep it moving. So my question is, knowing that that's the reality, what do those of us who know that this is the right path to take and the right way to move, what do we're not going to convince those people. What do we do in the meantime?
Whitney, you'll be so surprised with my answer on this, I think, or I would imagine you would be. In the work I have done, 9 out of 10 times, I actually meet people who say that they, at least either they understand what diversity, equity, or inclusion mean, okay, and they're like quite far along. But I also see it in people who may vote differently than me. They may have never interacted with someone who looks like me, and they'll meet someone like me, right? I was just, and I've spoken in places like I've advised and spoken in places like, Indiana, parts of Ohio, parts of Kentucky, where there are people who have said to me very clearly, like, "Hey, I've never met someone whose name is like yours," or "I've never talked to someone who grew up outside this country." Or there's a level of surprise, like, "Oh, we didn't expect you to be the one who would sort of lead the conversation here or sit at the front of the boardroom," or whatever it is. And even in those situations, again, like, I was obviously scared and nervous, and it was, either took a little bit of like mindset shift for me to feel ready and safe in those situations to show up as my authentic self. And what was interesting is I noticed time and again that actually there's a lot more commonality in human beings than there are differences. And I think a lot of people at the end of the day do want to be seen, they want to be heard, and they want to be valued, right? And so this is me saying that I actually think that even when I see hatred, or when I see sort of like I don't want progress, it comes really from a place of fear, and it comes from this, again, this mindset of like, it's a competition, it's a race, and if I see you get ahead, I see myself not getting ahead. So I want to talk about, I want to make sure that I get across that for me, I think that being able to rewire that, in my opinion and in my research, I really think it'll make a big difference. Now, you're so right that there are people, absolutely. I've been fortunate to not come in face-to-face contact with someone like this who has at least told me on my face. But of course, it's undeniable that we definitely know that there are people who are very deeply opposed to this. I don't see my job as trying to convince them. I see my job as finding my purpose, knowing what's right for me, looking at the data. This is I think what's troubling sometimes about these times. The data is very clear. Your race, your gender, your other measures of identity are going to impact your experience at the workplace. There's Harvard business school research to back this up. There's McKinsey research to back this up. Every major organization that researches management and leadership and business and workplace culture can verify this information. So it's not me making it up or me thinking that it's my experience alone. So for me, it's very clear that we have to continue focusing on this. We have to continue advocating for and agitating for the change that we want to see in the world.
Advocating and agitating, absolutely. I love it.
There's so much joy that can come out of curiosity, in the sense that, learning you grew up in Singapore, I'd love to know what your experience was like, how it was different than your experience now. I was just watching a TV show, a food travel show, that the culture lends so much to those things, that there's so much that can be gained from just being curious about what it was like for someone who doesn't have the same life experience you do.
You're so right. I mean, firstly, I'm a huge foodie, and I would say the number one thing, if you ever meet a Singaporean, you should probably ask them first if they've eaten and what they ate, because honestly, food is a national pastime. So that's why the travel show you watched probably was like 99% food and maybe like 1%. Like, go check out this thing.
There was an episode in Singapore.
So food is very much our life. But what I love about food, and especially what I love about Singapore food, is a lot of the best food is available at these street food, what's called hawker centers, right? And you will literally, there are immense like photos and my own experience backs this up. You can go and you can order like a plate of food for under US $10. Not only is it delicious, but you're often sitting side by side with people from a completely different background than you. And that means that you can have billionaires, of which we have quite a big representation in Singapore, billionaires and millionaires, sitting side by side with someone who is just the opposite of that, right? And you're sitting side by side, you're enjoying a plate of food, often on a shared table. And I think that sort of experience was very important in my early years. And I have to say, it is different from the US. I mean, the US backs, again, data backs this up. For a lot of people, Americans have not had interactions with people, meaningful interactions with people who are different than them. And that has a huge bearing in the workplace because, again, research shows, PRRI research shows that the first time for many Americans to actually interact with someone, especially of a different race than them, is in the workplace. So there's a lot of, again, back to this, where there's this idea that actually, does DEI matter? Does it matter to keep agitating, as I said, for an inclusive workplace and world? Does it actually matter? It does, because that's not going to change. Workplaces are getting more diverse. We're seeing many more measures of diversity than we've ever seen before. So to deny it in some ways is like denying that, the sky is blue, for example.
It makes me feel like DEI is that mirror that the country is finally being shown. I don't even know where to go with it, but it really just feels like a mirror that is being put in front of our faces. Some, reluctantly are looking at it and they don't like what they see.
Yeah.
And now we have to move forward in this, very changed world, and we have to keep up. But I love that the ultimate takeaway is that in order to keep up, we've got to do this together. So I love that. I love that part of this.
We have to. There is absolutely no way we can do this without each other, right? That was the number one takeaway I had, both in writing Inclusion on Purpose and especially now with Uncompete. Like there's just no way. And again, back to this idea that like we're biologically hardwired to collaborate. As much as we've been told this idea of, the sort of the predator, the top of the food chain, because there was something, lone wolfy about us as humans, that isn't true at all. It's because we're so good at collaboration. However, and this is where sort of the dark side of it comes in, we're so good at collaboration that sometimes that means that we're very, very good at organizing against someone we see as the other as well. Mm-hmm. And so that's, I think, an area that we're unfortunately seeing on the rise here.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to touch on a question, specifically for women. If you could leave our listeners with one practice that would most help women in leadership roles over the next decade, what would it be? And, with the work that we do here at Stern, we're really focused on helping our customers and our podcast listeners be able to put things into practice tomorrow. That's always a question that we ask is what can they do tomorrow? So thinking about the uncertainty of the next decade, what is it that will most help women rise in their leadership roles?
Because I'm a very tactical and tangible action type of person, I would say there's this beautiful strategy called amplification, which was popularized in the Obama presidency and in the administration, where when women started noticing that often when they would speak, including leaders, right, when they would speak in meetings, they were talked over. Again, good research to back this up that this happens to many women, including in the Supreme Court. What the women did is they banded together and they basically made sure that each one got credit for their ideas. So what it would look like is, I'd have a great, I'd maybe share an idea, which would often get ignored in the meeting or kind of talked over or not heard until a man repeated it. What would happen is, I'd band together. So I'd say the idea, Whitney would would jump in and say, Ruchika, that was a great idea. I agree. And let me build on that. And then someone else would do that, and it would continue on until that idea would not be able to be unheard. And I think that's a very tangible tactical strategy that can make a big difference. So amplification is one. I'll give you one more. And I think that it's this idea that as we see the importance of empathetic leadership on the rise, I don't want to take too much. I know we're trying to wrap up, but as we see the need for empathetic leadership on the rise, I would encourage women to really find a leadership style that feels very true to who they are. And I actually, what I appreciate is I think we're now in a time where women don't have to pretend to be robots and have no emotions to succeed as leaders. I actually think there are many more models of leadership, of women's leadership, which is empathetic, which is kind, which is about being fair and behaving with integrity. And I think that there is a lot more opportunity for us to shine as leaders with those sorts of traits rather than trying to emulate, again, an outdated model of leadership of the more command and control style.
As we do these interviews, I'm always listening for sound clips, for something we can pull out in 60, 45 seconds and that's it. I mean,
that's it.
Yeah, it's perfect.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Nobody knows your content better than you do. And I feel badly for the other podcasts that they're obviously not going to be able to compare to this, but good luck.
Never. This is the best one ever. Y'all
That's
are
what I like to hear.
The favorites. So thank you. Truly.
At the end, we like to get to a lightning round, which is just quick questions.
Okay.
We didn't prep you on these, so just want your natural reaction.
Like,
it's easy. Actually, the first one is probably the most difficult of them. Who's your most influential mentor?
My mother. This book is dedicated to her.
Yeah, love that.
Beautiful.
We probably touched on this next one in our conversation. What is your favorite local food that you can't get at home when you travel? That might be the hardest one.
This is really hard because, I really miss the seafood you get in Seattle when I travel. It's really special. And, it's the Pacific salmon and things like that. So on the one hand, it's that. And then the Singaporean food I miss the most is this dish called roti prata, which is this flaky, buttery, like crispy bread. And then you dip it in a delicious curry.
That's great. And I'm going to give a plug to this show. I've got no relation to it whatsoever, except the fact that I love it. It's on Netflix. It's called Somebody Feed Phil. And
I love it.
Yep. Phil Rosenthal, the creator of Everybody Loves Raymond. And he's just so genuine. And I did watch the episode in Singapore recently. And it's really a great look into how food can touch people on a very emotional level.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. That was research for this, wasn't it, Justin?
Absolutely. Okay, final question. Everyday fan or not, what is one sport you'll stop to watch if it's on TV?
Swimming.
Oh, okay.
Do you need more information?
No, not at all. No, that's why we want the gut reactions. And I purposely put this question in thinking that not everybody's a sports fan, but I feel like there's something that if you're walking by, maybe it's Olympics, maybe it's horse jumping, maybe it is baseball or football, but I feel like everybody's got that something that they'll just kind of stop and watch for a minute.
I mean, Simone Biles is the other.
Yep.
I mean, that's a very specific, and I write about her in the book as someone who just uncompetes so well, and actually. There's a huge like amount of modeling from Black women athletes of how do you really show up for each other and how do you really create space again in very, very challenging circumstances for each other. But Simone Biles, my goodness, like, you're watching, it's like, I have never felt so many emotions in one go, while in like whatever 5 seconds you're like I'm holding my breath, I'm like excited, I'm scared, I'm nervous, I'm frightened, like what's going on here?
And that's exactly what I wanted to get at, that those things sometimes don't have anything to do with sport. It has everything to do with how it makes you feel.
Everything.
I was a gymnast as a kid, so to watch
Ooh.
Simone until I got too tall for the sport, but to watch her just make the personal decision for herself to not go through with the competition because she knew that her head wasn't in the right mind space. I'm like, how could anybody give her backlash about that? But watching her model that made me feel so safe. You know, not even connecting with her on the actual sport, but just looking at someone who's at the top of her game say, I'm not going to do this because my mind's not right. I'm going to sit this one out and take care of me. That alone empowered me to feel okay with making that decision for myself. So if she touched me like that, I can imagine how many other people she touched like that.
Absolutely, Whitney. I hope you read the part in the book, where I wrote about her, and especially that decision to step back at a time that was just so high stakes. Everyone was watching. Of course, the fact that she came back 4 years later and slayed was.
Yep.
I said that, and I really wrote that. That's the cherry on that's the icing and the cherry on the cake, but it's not. It's the courage that she stepped back is, I think, the thing that is worth celebrating in a very competitive environment where there isn't space for people to really choose themselves over winning, right?
And she proved that it takes time for these things to fully come full circle.
Totally.
You know, she didn't go right back into it right away. She gave herself some time. Next competition's in 4 years. So the aspect of time came up in a previous conversation with Amy Gallo and Allison Fergale. And you know, they love you.
I mean, Allison, I don't know personally. I loved her work, but Amy is like a BF. I mean, talk about uncompeting. I mean,
Right.
talk about
Right.
someone who uplifts like end to end. So, yay, I'm so glad.
Yeah.
And she
Thank
did
you so much.
she very specifically mentioned you and the book.
Oh,
Mm-hmm.
thank you. So sweet.
So if people want to work with you, which they absolutely should, they can go to sternstrategy.com. Tell us where else you can be found online.
You can go to my website, which is ruchika.co or uncompetebook.com. Thank you.
Thank you.
you.
I can't tell you how much I appreciate your time. I know things are crazy with the book coming up, with the book coming out, and I appreciate it so much.
I appreciate you, both of you, so much. And gosh, Whitney, that top, is there a way I can like browse and buy? Because I'm like, it's like in my mind.
It's not ready yet for the masses. This is one of the
Okay.
samples, but
Oh,
I will let you know.
You have to be extremely, famous for Whitney Jennings to dress you.
You
is
are
the
just
message.
famous enough.
I love that. Both of you, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it. Anything else you need, let me know. But this was great. Thank you.